Um, okay. What I'm going to do is basically go through the basics of the federal funds that are coming, or in many cases are already here in our local counties, cities, neighborhoods. Then I'm very excited to have Andre Stoner, an organizer with Faith in Indiana and South Bend, here to talk about how he and other South Bend leaders impacted the allocation of American Rescue Plan funds in South Bend. Then we're going to talk a little bit about how you all can impact federal funds, just like Faith in Indiana, in your own communities. And then hopefully we'll have like a full 15 minutes for a Q&A. Once I start presenting my screen, it's going to be pretty hard for me to also look at the chat. Oh, glad Rebecca from South Bend is also going to be joining us. I'm excited about that. So if you do have a question, don't be afraid to speak up, or do a good community thing and read from the chat for me. So a lot of y'all have already done this, but if you could right now introduce yourself in the chat and where you're from, I would really appreciate it. I love knowing who is in the room. And I've just got one more request for someone who couldn't find the Zoom link. So I am going to text that to them. So if you could please drop where you're at in the chat while I do that, I can help this person get on the call. Great. Okay. Wonderful. Lauren, I'm glad you're here from Jeffersonville. Okay. Wonderful. Morgan, so glad to see you again. I believe we were just on another call together. Okay, so I am gonna share my screen and get started with this little presentation I have going here. Okay, so we're gonna be talking about funding for our local communities. As I mentioned before, my name is Tracy. I am with Hoosier Action, which is a nonpartisan statewide grassroots organization dedicated to improving the lives of everyday Hoosiers by acting together. And we really believe that the way to do that is that everybody should have a say in the decisions which impact them. And that includes decisions about public money, about this money coming from the American Rescue Plan. So the American Rescue Plan was the most recent federal COVID relief package. It was the really, really big multi-trillion-dollar federal bill, which passed back in March. And that bill really provided a whole bunch of essential relief to the COVID-19 crisis. It included a whole variety of things, from like your stimulus checks, your direct cash payments, to the child tax credit program, which is going to be starting on July 15th. And that's going to put $250 to $300 in the pockets of parents every month for the rest of the year. So if there's any parents on here, you're about to get a bunch more cash yourself. It included money for the National Vaccine Program. And then the slice of the money that we're going to be talking about today is money specifically for states, counties, and municipalities. So in the case of Indiana, the total amount of money coming to our state government and then our local governments is $5.8 billion, which is a lot of money. At the state level, that amount of money has basically been allocated as a part of the budget already. We're not really going to talk about that 1 billion or so. Instead, what we're going to be focused on today are the local monies. So there was roughly $1.3 billion, which got allocated to every single Indiana county, all 92 of them, and $3.6 billion to various towns and cities. If you happen to live in a community which is really small and not getting its own kind of like preset slice of ARP money, that's the shortened version of American Rescue Plan, the state government may also be sending a couple $100,000 to your municipality. And if you want to try to track that down, if you're in a smaller town, let me know, and I'm happy to help you try to find that. So the reason for this is because folks are really struggling, right? After COVID, still during COVID, right? There are still a lot of problems facing a lot of our communities that were exacerbated by this crisis. We are experiencing record overdoses this year. We are in a mental health crisis where a huge percentage of folks are developing depression, anxiety, a whole set of issues because of how hard this year has been. Many people just don't even have enough money to make ends meet. And an estimated 25% of Hoosiers are housing insecure and are going to be at risk of eviction in about a week when the federal moratorium on evictions ends. So there is a lot of good that this money could go toward. So what I want everyone to do right now is actually find out how much money your city or your county is getting. And you can do that by going to HoosierAction.org/ARP. And I'll show you what that looks like right now. So we have a landing page with a whole bunch of information about the American Rescue Plan. And there's a handy button called Find Out How Much Your Community Will Get. And you can click on it, and it's going to take you to a spreadsheet with a list of all the cities that are getting money. And there's a tab on the bottom which goes through all 92 counties and lists how much money they're getting. So what I would love for folks to do is figure out how much your city and or your county is getting, and just drop it in the chat. Let folks know, how much money you're going to be getting in Jeffersonville or South Bend, just so you know what you're working with.
Keep right to stay on South Brookville Road, then turn right onto Melvenia Street.
Okay, looks like we're getting some in the
Take
chat.
The next right onto Melvenia Street.
Okay, yeah, Seymour is getting over $4 million. South Bend 63 million. St. Joseph County 53 million. Yeah, anyone else know how much their county or their city is getting? Also, if anyone is struggling with the spreadsheet, let me know. Yeah, Morgan. In Indy, you're getting 237 million. Bloomington, 22 million. This is awesome. So it is a lot of money. Jackson County, 8.5 million. Yeah. So this money could really be transformative for your counties and towns. And it's pretty unprecedented to just suddenly find out, if you're a local government official, that you have way more money than you thought you had in your budget. So here's kind of the really broad strokes of what this money can get used for. And this is guidance from the US Treasury, from the federal government. So there's 4 basic buckets, but the big thing here is that it's incredibly broad. And that's because the American Rescue Plan, this bill, it was written intentionally based on the idea that local communities, local people who live in their counties, county officials, city officials, that y'all know best what your county needs, and that a one-size-fits-all approach to COVID relief is not the way to go. So the 4 main buckets are responding to the public health emergency and its negative economic impacts, including assistance to households, small businesses or nonprofits, and to support impacted employees. So that is incredibly broad, right? Because COVID impacted everything. So that could take the form of direct cash payments, your city could be writing y'all some checks, they could do that. Or it could be a small business relief program. It could even be something if you say live in a town where tourism is really important, like Nashville, Indiana, you could spend money on something that would support the tourism industry to try to bring people there back. The money can also go to pay essential government workers or provide grants or payments to people who are essential workers who are on the front lines of this pandemic and really put their lives at risk. It can be used to finance government shortfalls. So there are some municipalities where, because the economic devastation of the pandemic was so bad, they couldn't make their budget. Spencer, Indiana comes to mind here. And so you can spend the money on that. You cannot spend it on pensions. That's like the one thing basically that this money cannot go towards. And then finally, you can support water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure. So if your roads are bad, if your internet does not work because you live out in the country, like these are valid uses. If your water is not clean, right? We have many, many towns and cities in Indiana where folks can get sick from their water. That is a valid use of ARP funds. The bottom line, the thing that I cannot emphasize enough, is that there is substantial flexibility here. So I have heard a lot that people are like, we're waiting for more guidelines. We need more information. Like, I'm here to tell you, this is actually an opportunity to really creatively come up with ways to use this money because it is so flexible. It is so broad. And this is an opportunity to kind of imagine more. Really think about what your town, what your community needs. Is it a community center for kids? Is it a mental health like place people can go to, like some additional funding, some group therapy sessions, right, that are open to the public? There's lots and lots of ways that this money can get used. And what is really special about it is that you get to have a say in it, and US Treasury, like the federal government, this incredibly powerful thing, it agrees. So I actually even included a quote here from the federal guidance, which is that states, territories, tribal, and local governments should engage their constituents and their communities in developing plans to use these payments, given the scale of funding. Okay, so don't let your city council member, don't let your county commissioner tell you that you don't get a say in this, because actually you deserve a say in this. This is public money. This is your money. And you probably have a lot of like really good ideas. You probably know what your community needs the most. So I want to turn it over now to Andre and Rebecca to talk about how they impacted in South Bend ARP funding. But before I do that, does anyone have any questions just like about the broad stroke things that I just laid out, the basics of this money? Okay, I'm glad that was clear. I'm seeing some head shakes. Okay, Andre and Rebecca, do you wanna take over and talk a little bit about what you did?
Sure, and I'll just say a word of intro. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's really good for Faith in Indiana. We are really glad to partner with Hoosier Action, sister organization, doing really incredible work together. And Faith in Indiana in St. Joe County, we're about 25 congregations. We say we're Black, brown, white, Catholic, Jewish, Pentecostal, working intentionally to build power, to be able to impact and affect decisions that make a difference for our families. And Rebecca Go has been really active in the jail diversion task force and working really hard on our most recent set of actions that are talking about where this ARP money goes. So I'm just going to turn it over to Rebecca to introduce herself and to tell you about the work we've done. And we have some photos then, and then hopefully we'll have some time for Q&A.
Thanks, Andre, and thanks everyone for having me here. My name is Rebecca, and I'm born and raised in South Bend, Indiana. And I joined Faith in Indiana sort of briefly, or like right before the pandemic. Actually, I started having conversations with Andre, who I've known in other capacities for a long time. And we had a conversation that related to my work. And after we were done wrapping up our conversation, I said, I'm really interested in knowing what you guys are doing about mental health. And Andre basically said, well, what do you mean by that? And I said, well, I had a situation a few years ago in my family where my former husband had a mental health crisis it went on for several days, but the big incident happened about 2:30 in the morning with him having a psychosis, not really understanding what was going on, but threatening both to harm himself, acting very irrationally, clearly intoxicated, and he had a gun. And me not knowing what to do. And so not knowing what to do, it being the middle of the night, I called 911 to say, help, he's going to hurt himself. Meanwhile, he runs out into the night and takes a car and drives away. And I literally don't know what's going to happen. And they eventually track him down and they approach him. And end of a long story is they put him in jail. And that actually, it kept him safe, but it led to a whole bunch of other issues down the line, in terms of probation and having a record and dealing with the court system and a lot of other things. And that happened in 2016. And ever since then, I've been sort of thinking and wondering, well, this just doesn't seem right. And so in our conversation with Andre, I was like, what are you doing about mental health? And he was able to hear me and say, actually, what we're working on is treatment, not incarceration. And your story fits right in with what we're doing, which was great. So he invited me to start working with a jail diversion task force, which is part of our group in Faith in Indiana, on this really hairy issue, very multifaceted and complex issue of treatment versus incarceration. Rather than putting people in jail for mental health or addiction issues, what are other things we can be doing? Obviously, COVID disrupted things a little bit in 2020. We did do a little work, or Faith in Indiana did some work trying to get the jails to reduce populations just to reduce the risk of the spread of COVID, but we weren't digging deep into sort of the underlying issues. That changed this spring, or really this winter, when we started meeting regularly in February, I think, to say, okay, guys, it's new year. Let's get cracking. What should we be doing? Fortunately, Andre, meanwhile, had been doing a lot of work behind the scenes to reach out to a group called the Vera Institute and to set up some opportunities to learn about systems that work in other communities. So we had a lot of Zoom webinars learning about what works, what are alternatives, and we learned about a really forward-thinking system in Tucson, Arizona, and we learned about another system actually here in Indiana, where they're using like a system approach, a systematic mental health approach to say, okay, rather than just putting people in jail when they have a mental health crisis or an addictions crisis, we're going to actually stand up different ways to do things, which looks like in some counties, a mobile crisis response team that would have responded to my home with my husband or wherever they found him, rather than the police, or tangentially with the police. It might look like a mobile or a crisis response center, a place to physically have brought him rather than jail. That would be open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It could look like a lot of things, maybe more, permanent supportive housing, for people for whom this becomes such an issue that they literally lose their jobs. There's a whole spectrum, but basically ways of being that we hadn't even imagined in our community. From those conversations, we started thinking really strategically, and Andre was pointing out, we're getting this big infusion of money, guys, and there's going to be like our normal county budgeting process starts in the summer, and now it's looking like we're getting even more money from the federal government. We need to be having conversations. So our little task force, as well as other groups and congregations within Faith in Indiana, we started having strategic meetings with community partners, including public officials. This meant one of our county commissioners. It meant presenting to the county council. It meant our city council, meeting with some of our city council members. It meant meeting with the head of our Chamber of Commerce and really having conversations, but not just conversations open-ended, but hey, we've been learning about these other ways of being. What if we did that here in St. Joe County? And why aren't we exploring this option? And who should lead this effort? Like, it's fine that we're doing this now, but why isn't our health department in charge of this? Isn't mental health part of public health? And those conversations probably happened February, March, April. And there were probably like 20, 25, Andre can correct me if I'm wrong, sort of individual meetings with public leaders we knew the power to actually do something. And then we had a large event. It's called a public action, May 16th. And we invited some of these public officials to state in that meeting things that they were willing to say to us behind closed doors. We wanted to them to say it in front of the public. And we were asking them, will you put aside 10% of funding that is coming to our community from the American Rescue Plan for mental health crisis response? We want a mobile crisis team. We want a crisis response center. And we want a plan and staffing to make this happen in the next few years. And so we invited, the head of our county health department, the president of our county commissioners, the head of our sheriff, because obviously there's a huge interaction with jail, and then the head of our local community mental health provider, to all make a public commitment to work on this problem collaboratively and to set aside funds that are coming to our community. And our communities, we've got South Bend, which is a big city. It's getting 63 million. Mishawaka, which is a smaller city, is getting 11 million. And then our county is getting 53 million. So $127 million are coming to our community. We asked, we're trying to lead this conversation to say 10% of those funds need to go to mental health infrastructure because it diverts people from jail and because it's the right thing to do. And so we had that public action May 16th. We got those commitments. We also had the mayor of South Bend there. He spoke on a slightly related but different issue. We had about 270 people from South Bend attend. It was kind of the first large public event we've had in this community since COVID. And then I think about 50 attended online through Zoom. So I think there's still lots of work to be done, right? Now our job is to keep them to that promise. And we have to do a little bit of figuring out how exactly the process is. They're sort of building the plane while they're flying it. They're getting the money and building the system to distribute the money at the same time. And so we have to figure out how we get our proposal in there, which it seems like right now means mostly working with our health officer, county health officer, because it would become line items in his budget proposal. But anyways, that's kind of the work we've done. Andre, I'm sure I missed stuff.
No, that was awesome. Thank you so much, Rebecca. I just have to say, Rebecca has been a superstar in this work. Amazing. And I want to, if I can, Tracy, I'd like to share some photos, some images. So, and you'll see Rebecca and her work. So this is, just an overview. First of all, like the research actions that she said we did, that we were doing. So here is with somebody from Beacon Health. Here's with somebody from Kokomo, what they're doing. Here's with Margie Balfour from Tucson. And the sheriff, you'll see, was on, people from Oaklawn, our mental health provider, people who work with the homeless, a wide range of people. Bob Einters, the health official, were on, and we learned about like the best practices in the country. We did then research actions with state reps. We're going to need help from the state. Maureen Bauer, And then also with the mayor, with the CEO of the chamber, with another state rep, and a bunch of other people. And then here are just pictures from the action that Rebecca was, okay, we ratified, we're going to act a month beforehand. So it was all like on a tight schedule. Yes, we're going to do this. A leap of faith, put a date on the calendar, we're going to make it happen. And then here is the day, clergy processional, showing the power that we have representing the community. Music at the front end. Alfred from St. Augustine Catholic Church facilitated. Clergy and public officials on the podium. We did a memorial for COVID victims, and that's what this is. Here are public officials from the right to the left. The sheriff, then Lori Knopfsinger from Oak Lawn, Bob Einters, health officer, Mayor James Mueller, and President Andy Castelny of the commissioners. Rabbi Karen, this is the crowd. We did some work on use of force, Pastor Hunter, and this is what we engaged the mayor on, Mayor James Mueller. Then we had two stories, personal stories of people who are impacted by their family members by mental health and addictions challenges who ended up in the incarceration system. And then here, Rebecca now engaging public officials. And Jeff Walker did a research report. This is the problem. Our jail is the de facto detox center in St. Joe County. We can do better than that. Our jail is the place where most people get mental health services. We can do better than that. And we're getting $125 million. And we've researched there are solutions, folks. Time to step up. That was the deal. And so here's the sheriff. He's our #1 advocate. We've been working with him for 2 years. We've had a relationship for 2 years. He wrote an op-ed in the paper. So he gives cover for a lot of other people. We provide the push and he gives the cover, and together we're moving things. And then Rebecca, you want to say something about this this puzzle?
Yeah, frequently these events might happen within a church or a synagogue. And so because it was outdoors, we were a little concerned that people wouldn't be able to see or hear or really like feel as engaged as they would in an indoor space. So Audrey had this great idea that we would actually have a visible symbol of what was going on. So the puzzle, well, the background is our city, literally a map of the city, and then there's the outline of a heart. And then as each person, the sheriff and the county health officer and the county commissioner made their commitment, they got a piece of the puzzle and they tacked it on. But the first piece that was put on was us. So I put a piece on, I think it was the bottom piece, but I can't remember now, that represented we the people are asking and we're, you know, demanding / willing to work alongside you, government and public officials, to say, this is something we need and we will be part of this as well. So that was part of, this
So here's the sheriff pledging to do his part. Here's Lori Knopfsinger from Oak Lawn. Here's our health officer, Bob Einters. He's going to pledge to do his part. And here's our county commissioner. And he's got the money. He's one of the people with the money. And there's one puzzle piece left. That's the money. County Commissioner Andy Castelny. And Rebecca did a beautiful job engaging. Of course, we'd had conversations with them before. He knew exactly what was coming. And he said, I don't make all the decisions alone, but I will be an advocate that these projects get funded through ARP money. And there he is putting, he's a Republican county commissioner, putting his piece of the puzzle into place. And then we're getting sent. And then the public officials afterwards are starting to talk to each other. How are we going to do this? And that's the end of the story. So maybe before we go to questions, I'll just say one other thing. We had the health officer, we've built a long-standing relationship with him as well. And, you know, beforehand, we met the week before, and Rebecca and I and others were talking with him. He said, well, my approach would be to, you know, get 5 or 6 people in a room and make a plan, and then we've executed. I'm still trying to figure out why we're going to do this like big public thing. And well, we knew it because it's important to have these public officials make these public commitments. And it's also important for them to hear it from each other. And it's important. It's a way for us to hold them accountable. He called me the next morning at 8:15 and said, wow, there were a lot more people than I expected. And he said, I need the number for the person in Tucson who is doing that good work down there, because we need to be in touch and find out what they're doing. And last Friday, Rebecca and I were on the phone with him for an hour. And maybe you want to just, in a couple sentences, we were calling to see, because we know we need to now keep them working at this. And the report we got was so encouraging. You want to say a word, Rebecca?
Yeah, Dr. Bob is awesome, and he's new to our community. He's only been here 18 months. He got here in February, and the pandemic started in March. So he's been making his way through sort of the politics, local politics as they stand, which is, it's a really neat position to be kind of in there with him and seen as an advocate and an ally as he's doing that, as citizens. But he has done a lot of legwork. He's met with the heads of both of our local hospitals, our community mental health provider. He's starting to have conversations with other public officials about budget line items. He held a conversation. He was super apologetic. He's like, I didn't invite you because it was all the major players politically that he needed to be able to pass the budget, and he didn't want them to feel threatened by us. But we were like, no. As long as you're doing the work, we just want to know, because there's always a concern that they make a big, hullabaloo on stage on Sunday, and then they do nothing for, 6 weeks or 8 weeks. But he has done a ton. He's probably had 20 meetings in the last 3 to 4 weeks, all on this thing that we said was important to us. It sounds like it's really become important to him too. And in fact, he said he's really enjoying learning about it and trying to build a new way to be.
He said he was taking 10 items to there's an ARP group, county commissioners, county council, who are making recommendations where the county money goes. He said he's taking 10 items, and the top item of it on his list is the crisis response center, which we've been advocating for. So that's enough from us. I don't know if there are questions and answers. Questions we're glad to field if there's time.
Yeah, I think there's some time if folks have them. I just wanted to say that was incredibly inspiring. And I know many of you folks on this call fall into that category of like community stakeholder, like, or maybe you have a nonprofit organization, and you really would fit into that kind of like community coalition that Rebecca and Andre described, that are a part of winning these local solutions. And I just love that this was like a thing that you were working on, that you cared about, and then you're like, oh, this is an opportunity, and you jumped on it. So it's just a beautiful story. Any questions from anyone? Okay, well, if you think of something, don't hesitate to bring it up later in the call. And what I really want to hammer home here is like, you too can have a mobile response unit. Like, South Bend is not the only place in this state where the jails are the #1 detox center, are the #1 mental health provider. I know in Bloomington, that is also the case, here in Monroe County. And, that is not right. It doesn't help folks. So there's lots and lots of opportunities. I also want to add that, Andre and Rebecca did a tremendous amount of policy research, and if there is something you want to work on and you need to be connected with someone, or you want policy guidance, that is a thing I am happy to do. The Vera Institute, I also know them. They're amazing. So just wanted to plug that as well. So I guess I just wanted to ask, does anyone have any thoughts or ideas about like what you might want to use ARP funds for in your local community? Like, what are the struggles that you're facing? What are the things that you see or care about?
Tracy, Tanda put a question in the chat.
Oh, thank you, Michelle. Oh, yes. Okay, Tanda asked, do you know if there are any updates on the interim final ruling from the U.S. Treasury on guidance for use of ARP funds? Last you checked July 16th. No. So Tanda, I believe that's probably going to be the last set of guidance that we're going to get. And if anyone wants a link to the like long legal document on that, I am happy to share it. What I've heard a lot is people are like, we need more guidance, we need more guidance. But it's like, no, it's very flexible. Like, that's kind of the point. Deborah, daycare and rental assistance, 100%. Those are things which ARP money can go towards: rental assistance, mortgage assistance, providing subsidized daycare or free daycare. And what's so cool, especially about like a daycare program, is then you're also creating like good jobs for people, right? So I just want to share a few more examples of things that ARP money can go towards, which y'all might not have thought of. And I'm also just like always available for a brainstorm on this because I'm so excited about it. So, you know, small business support. I know lots of people who have lost small businesses or are on the edge, and that our main streets have really been devastated. We talked a little bit about broadband services, mental health services. You can kind of create community mental health centers in public schools, and ARP money can go towards funding substance use treatment and harm reduction programs that prevent overdose, that save lives and stop the spread of disease. So this is really, there's like transformative potential here. Yep, Myra noted public transportation, absolutely valid use of ARP funds, childcare, housing access. These are things that people have needed for a long time, and the need is only greater now post-COVID. So Andre and Rebecca provided a really beautiful template for how you, everyday citizen, can impact the ARP allocation process. So the first thing that I would recommend is simply reaching out to your local elected officials, especially your mayor, city council members, and county commissioners, and just express your interest in like, hey, I know, you know, Jeffersonville is getting this many millions of dollars. I really want to make certain that there's public involvement in the process. And like, I'd love to know if there's any upcoming meetings or, you know, how I can impact the process. So just a really friendly outreach. And we actually have a toolkit at hoosieraction.org/ARP, which gives you a kind of template email. And I'm here to, if you can't find someone's email, I'm here to help. You can also give them a call. Many places are having city council or county commission meetings right now about this money. I recommend attending them, perhaps speaking up. You can write a letter to your editor. And then most importantly, the thing that Andre and Rebecca's story really emphasized is organizing friends, family, other community members, getting them involved is going to make certain that these funds really go to the things that matter the most to you, that are going to make the biggest improvement in your community. And what is important to understand is that this money is already here. Like 50% of it has been received by most local governments throughout the state. And then the next 50% is going to come in a second tranche next year. And then the allocation process is probably going to happen really in 3 waves. So right now there's a kind of initial set of allocations that are going on. And then because the money spans multiple financial years, this is not your only bite at the apple. So if some city council member or some county commissioner, you know, says like, no, that's already spent, we can't do anything, like it's BS. Like, right? You still have multiple opportunities to make certain that you as a member of the public influences this process. And what I can tell you, unfortunately, is that despite Treasury guidelines, this money will get spent without your input if you don't speak up. So even though Treasury really urges community involvement, what I've been seeing across the state is a lot of people don't know about this money. And a lot of county commissions, a lot of city councils are allocating it in ways that don't include public input or robust public outreach. So we've got another thing in the chat. Yes, yeah, and Myra noted till 2024, yeah. So I just want to give you an example here of what's going on in Columbus, Indiana. This is from the Columbus Republic, and Amanda is a Hoosier Action leader in Columbus who got really interested in local ARP money. And she went ahead and attended a local county commission meeting and was pretty horrified by what happened. So there were 6 people on this Zoom call, so it wasn't even that heavily attended. And they had questions, they had concerns in the chat. They were like, hey, we want to know how this money is getting spent. We want to know what the process is. And they were not listened to. They were ignored. They were not valued. And this was incredibly frustrating for her. And so what she's actually doing now is she published this letter to the editor in the Columbus Dispatch. And she actually had a, I believe, city council member who emailed her after this letter and was like, I agree with you. The way that the public was treated was shocking and inappropriate. And I want to work with you to make certain that there is public input in this ARP spending. And she's bringing together a group of people, just like Andre and Rebecca did, to advocate first and foremost for a public process, but then also for the stuff that she needs in her community. So we're doing lots of surveys down there and finding out, for instance, the housing is a major concern for folks who are living in Columbus. Before we go to general Q&A, and we should have a full 15 minutes for it, I just want to urge all of you to reach out and start to establish a relationship with your local public officials today, because that's just, it'll take you 5 minutes, and you can at least kind of find out what is going on with these funds in your community and what the process is. And then finally, I want to make certain that you guys know, I'm here to help out and support you as you try to find information about this. It can be really hard to find news coverage, even of what's going on. So I'm happy to support you, and just want to plug again that HoosierAction.org/ARP has a toolkit with a whole bunch of guides in it, as well as it's where you can look up information on local money. And then we, Hoosier Action, are actively organizing and building towards campaigns in a set of counties. So Will Stoffer is working in Clark, Floyd, and Scott County. Tasha is in Morgan County, Stephanie in Bartholomew County, Lakshmi in Jackson County, and Eva is in Lawrence County, and then she also organizes moms up and down the state. So if you happen to live in any of those counties, I would urge you to also reach out to an organizer there who would support and coach you, just like Andre did in South Bend. So looks like we got some activity in the chat. Yeah, Deborah, Marion County. So we're not actively organizing in Marion County. We have some members and some leaders there, and I'm happy to connect you to them. But we're not planning on running a campaign. But what we really care about is that no matter the county, Hoosiers have their voices heard during this process. So I'm here to kind of support that. Let's see, Tanda, you noted the funds need to be obligated by 12/31/24. Yes, yeah, that's super helpful. So what that means is that city commissions, mayors, city councils, they need to have some sort of plan by 2024, or they potentially lose the money. So they don't have to spend it immediately, although many local governments are, right? Because we are still in the midst of this crisis. There are immediate needs, but they do have some time. And so, that's one of the reasons why I'm get involved with this as soon as you can, and don't let anybody tell you you're too late, right? So you still have a chance to impact this. Good. Other questions or comments that y'all have?
Yeah, Tracy, I do have a question.
Yeah, please.
So one of the things that I learned about the American Rescue Plan money is allegedly that the state required an American Rescue Plan Act fund for monies to be put in order for towns and cities, counties to take care of those funds. Is that correct? Or is that maybe not entirely accurate?
Yeah, I'm happy to dig more into this specific policy thing. My
Mhm.
understanding is that the state government and the organizations of like counties and municipal governments are suggesting that people do this, that that's how the funds are organized. But my understanding is that that is not necessarily a requirement. City and county governments need to report to the federal government like how this money is spent, right? Because there are those federal treasury guidelines, and they have metrics and rules about doing that reporting. I also know that one of the rules about the ARP money is that the state cannot interfere in how the local governments spend it.
Mhm.
So while there may be sort of some guidelines within the financial structures, this is not a thing that unless you want to do something that violates state law, it's like not a thing the legislature or the governor can mess with. That's a cool thing about this.
Okay.
Yeah, and I will make the slides available and potentially the recording as well. I'm also going to do another one of these probably in the evening next week if you know other people who would benefit from this. And then if Tyler or if anyone else wants a kind of like ARP Fund 2.0 that is like more wonky, I'm very open to doing that. Just let me know. And I can drop in the chat too. Prosperity Indiana next Monday on the 28th is going to be doing a more like wonky policy oriented one. And that is free and open to the public as well. So if you're a little bit more on that side of things, that meeting might be really useful. Was that helpful, Tyler?
Yeah, it was. The reason I ask is because, and I actually missed the city council meeting back in April, but it was reported that basically first step for the town or for the city of Seymour was to create a separate fund for these monies to go into. And I understand, how that may make things a little easier. You don't just put it in the general fund, you put it into its own separate fund, which makes it easier to allocate as well as keep track of and all that. At the same time, depending on the types of funds that are open, sometimes that can become a little bit more easy to manage or manipulate in different ways. And so, it's just, the way it was reported in the local Tribune was that it was necessary and pretty much mandated by the state that this fund be created, whereas that's not necessarily something that reflects on the government. For all I know, that could have been something that was put in inaccurately into the news story, or it could have been something that was just kind of said offhand at the meeting without a direct like, this is the way it is, but more so like, this is the suggestion by the state type of thing.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's the problem when you're not there to hear and see with your own eyes and ears. It can, get a little game of train or whatever the little kid game where one person says it, the next one telephone. That's it. So in this case, it would be newspaper. But so yeah, I was wondering about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's super common. And that's what a lot of, and I'm happy, Tyler, to share this with you. That is definitely, the way that this stuff is confusing and unprecedented, right? And so the way that a lot of county commissioners and other elected officials like found out about these funds is their association had like a meeting with a PowerPoint. And in that PowerPoint, they said the first step is that you should create one of these like funds, right? And I could totally see how that was their suggestion, right? And that could kind of become understood as a Band-Aid. Now you're totally right. Those kind of funds could be easier to track, or they could also be harder to track. So it really depends on how committed your local government is to transparency. And then like the public pressure, right? If the public demands it, you can start to move people. I'll also just say that ARP money can be spent by the local government, right? So like it can be, you know, a program that is paid for and run by the local government. Or ARP money can be allocated to private nonprofit organizations. So, you know, you could imagine a situation where that would be really good, like, right? This local organization, like they know how to address housing needs, right? They have this whole staff, they're ready to go. So it would make sense to just like move the ARP money to that local organization. The thing that is also, you know, potentially dangerous is if the public, if y'all like aren't engaged, and then that money gets moved into like a private foundation, like it might actually not go to helping people, right? Unless there's community oversight. And then this is a little bit of a weird quirk too. Money can move from city government to county government. So if like the city of Bloomington is like, you know what, we actually don't need all these funds, but like folks in rural Monroe County do, they can actually pass the money from the city government to the county government, but it's really not clear that it can move the other way.
Okay.
So, but yeah, I'll look into that a little bit more because that's a great question. And it adds a layer of complexity. Yeah. Anyone else? Any other questions? Okay. Well, I'm gonna wrap it up then. So I will send out the slides. I'm putting right now in the chat my cell phone and my email address as well. And the thing I really want to leave y'all with is that the limit here is really like our own imagination in terms of like how this money can be spent. And this is really an opportunity to like get your community needs funded like right now. It's pretty incredible. And I'm really excited to like hear about what y'all doing and provide any support. And if you have like a stubborn city council member, like I'm happy to coach you on how to move them and how to make this happen, because out of an incredibly painful year, we have an opportunity to build a much brighter future for our state and really prevent a lot of the harms that people are experiencing right now. So have a wonderful afternoon. Please let me know if you have any questions. And I'm excited.